And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. And today, my guest is Heather Dominick. Heather is pretty interesting from the perspective of sort of what she's done in previous lives, what she's currently doing, and what she can share with us. So she's a former high school drama teacher. She's collaborated with Bette Midler, so that's fascinating. Graduate of NYU, and her sort of current path is on mentoring and focusing on highly sensitive entrepreneurs, which is sort of the movement she's created. And she's done a lot in sort of the online training and mentoring space. And trivia question, she's also appeared in a Lifetime television show and has appeared in numerous books, including Stepping Stones to Success, which was a book that was co-authored or primary contributor was Deepak Chopra. So anyway, thanks for joining us today, Heather. Lots of interesting tidbits there.
Thank you, Peter. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Cool. So how does one go from being a high school drama teacher to an author and a thought leader? And did the drama stay with you?
Hopefully there is less drama, or at least that's always the intention. And wow, how to talk about that leap from being a high school drama teacher to now in the shortest way possible.
Okay.
I would say probably the answer, kind of oddly, is 9/11. So I was working as a high school drama teacher at an inner city public school in Manhattan. And I had actually just started that job the week of 9/11. And though I most likely would not have been able to say it at the time, looking back, I can definitely see the dots connected there. It was such an intense time for all of us, but definitely for those of us living in the city. So much that changed, and there was this real quality in the air of, what are you doing with your life, and how are you going to use these precious moments that you have. And I was far from unhappy in my teaching job. I actually loved my students. I loved the work. I was very frustrated with the system.
Yeah.
And I would say that was really the impetus for, going out and starting my first business as a nutrition and wellness coach. And I can honestly say I had no idea what I was doing. So that there was definitely an element of naivete that was thrown in there as well. And then, every step since has really just been, following the direction of the next steps in front of me where I am now.
So let's fast forward to now, because your movement, if you will, sort of the core content and such that you work on, you call it the highly sensitive entrepreneur. And you and I spoke a while ago about it, and I was really fascinated because I've done a lot of work over the years with entrepreneurs. I am an entrepreneur, but nothing was like what you had brought out there in terms of this subset of entrepreneurs that are highly sensitive and how that impacts the types of businesses they go into, how they operate, et cetera. So talk a little bit about sort of how you found your lanes. It's clearly an interesting niche, and you found it. So how did that happen?
Yeah. For sure. Absolutely. So that came about from a dark night of the soul. And the dark night of the soul came from the first time that I brought my business across the $1 million mark.
Yep.
And they're connected, but not directly related. So I had been self-employed for about 5 years the first time I crossed the $1 million mark. And I was definitely very overwhelmed. I was overworked. I was overexhausted. And I really, as a result, started questioning everything, just really wondering, if this was the path for me, if this was the industry for me. And through that, I discovered Dr. Elaine Aron. And Dr. Aron is the founding researcher of the highly sensitive person, really comes out of work that she started mid-90s. And when I discovered that I was highly sensitive, and I had never even heard that phrase before and understood what it meant, it didn't surprise me so much that I was highly sensitive, but what surprised me was how highly sensitive I was. And because I've always been a believer and a teacher that your ideal client is a version of you, I took of Dr. Aaron's assessments into a group of 25 women entrepreneurs that I was coaching at the time, had them all take the assessment, and every single one of them was highly sensitive. But what was surprising there was that not one of them wanted to be. So I knew that moment that this was a really important path to go down, that one, I was going to need to do things differently if I was going to continue to succeed as an entrepreneur, and that there were many others like me who would also support.
So you took it from sort of a personal revelation, some introspection, and then you identified, and then you realized like, wow, I'm surrounded by these types of folks. And then I would imagine you realized nobody's having this conversation. I think it needs to be had, and I'm going to put my stake in the ground there. Is that a fair summary of
That
sort
is
of
exactly what happened. Exactly.
So, which is so entrepreneurial, right? So, oops, there's a market. Oops, nobody's serving it. I think I better jump on this. And by the way, I love it. So that there's sort of a really interesting through line there. So, given that there's some research here, there's some assessment tools here. You sort of did some beta testing or whatever with your peeps and your tribe and realized it's a thing. How do you then go about, now that you've identified sort of the market and the need, how to serve them in a way that's beneficial to them and you? And what I mean by that is oftentimes I'll find authors or thought or creative types finding a market to serve that can't really serve them. Maybe it's people in transition or the unemployed or whatever, but it has to be a complete circle, because if the community can't support the thought leader or the author, it's not going to work long term. How did that all connect?
Yeah, I so appreciate that. So what I really hear you speaking to, what is almost like a niche within the niche. So I had discovered the need that for highly sensitive entrepreneurs to be supported. And then from there, what I got clear about is not only is the target a highly sensitive who wants to be an entrepreneur, but the target is a highly sensitive who wants to or is an entrepreneur and is very serious about creating financial success, number one, and number two, willing to do the inner healing that's required as part of that journey. And that's what I got very clear about, so that the HSEs, the highly sensitive entrepreneurs that I serve, are those who are, in what I say, willing to do the work. They're willing to invest because they recognize that the return is going to be massive in terms of financial prosperity, but also massive in terms of a sense of finally having some inner peace with self and who they are. And so then therefore just feeling better in their day-to-day life, having a more successful business, having better relationships, more successful marriages, happier in parenting, et cetera, et cetera. So that is really how the circle completes.
I love that. So how did you sort of confirm that not only is there a need, but these folks would be willing to financially support it in a way that is significant enough for you to have a business that's not only profitable and spins off the cash that you'd like it to, but meaningful for you?
So I think I'm getting the question clear. And if I'm not, definitely stop me and move me in the right direction. So one is that I know who I am as myself, that
Yep.
I am this person, that I am committed to that growth. So I know those qualities and characteristics. And so I started with the people who were right in front of me, meaning, those clients that I was already serving, those who were connected to me via email lists, social media communication, and really made that element of seriousness an important aspect of my message. And if you have the HSE who is serious about creating that financial success and is serious about doing the work that's required to create that, then there is going to be a willingness to invest.
Got it. So now let's talk about, you've got your course, you've got your mentoring. What are describe for me Heather World, if you will. What are the various lines of business and how do they connect? Meaning, how do you connect sort of thought leadership to authorship to, things on the marketing side to things on the monetization side? What does that look like?
Yes. So the primary form of service is our mentoring programs. So we have 4 mentoring programs. We have our 6-month mentoring program, which is the foundational principles that any and every HSE needs. And that is geared towards 3 categories of HSEs that I've identified. You have the person who's highly sensitive and they want to be self-employed, but they don't know what their business is meant to be. You have the person who's highly sensitive, who's tried everything to get the business off the ground, and we are their last ditch effort. And then you have the very highly successful, highly sensitive entrepreneur. They're already generating 6 to 7 figures, but they've just discovered that they're highly sensitive and they need to learn how to do business differently. So that really starts in the 6-month program. Then from there, we have 3-year-long programs that are really just about what level of support do you want to avail yourself to. And everything really focuses around those mentoring programs. So I am constantly engaged in research and development of new teachings. And I deliver those new teachings for the Business Miracles community of highly sensitive entrepreneurs that are made of those mentoring programs twice a year at a spring training retreat and a fall training retreat. And then everything that goes into supporting marketing comes out of those new level of teaching development as well.
Got it. So there's a calendar, there's different cadence, right, on the calendar,
Yes.
and it's structured. So really, really interesting. So what are some of the things that you've done along the way that you might have thought were brilliant, but in hindsight, maybe didn't stick as much? And then we'll get to some of the good stuff. But what are some of the places where you maybe skinned your knee and thought, wow, this has got to work because this smells great?
Okay. Does it say anything about the fact that I'm hesitating and not coming up with something right away? Let's see. Okay. Here, you know what? I think the best way to answer that is where I have skinned my knee the most is when I have blindly followed what others are doing in their marketing within the industry space. Meaning, one particular example is for a while, it was very popular to have what's referred to as an evergreen webinar running.
Yep.
So anyone can sign up to watch the webinar at any time, and then they can, take action and join the program, buy the product from that evergreen webinar. So I had that going for probably like 2 or 3 years, and it really just there was not a strong ROI on that setup. And what I really learned most significantly from there is that my people are different in the same way that I'm different. So what is standard in the industry is not going to produce in the same way with the highly sensitives that I'm here to serve. So there's always an additional step for me to take in anything that I'm learning in regards to marketing, or again, what might just, be a particular form of marketing that's out there in the space. I have to take it through an additional step for myself, and I have to adapt it. I have to look at what elements will make sense for my people, which elements will not make that much sense, and how do I want to use this so that I'm using a tool that's effective, but making sure that most importantly, it's effective for my people.
Okay, so that is really powerful and borderline brilliant. And what I mean by that is oftentimes when I'm working with clients, I'll say to them, okay, well, who do you admire strictly from a content perspective? Who do you dig, whose stuff do you dig? What resonates with you? And then a separate question might be, who do you admire because they're killing it, irregardless of your resonance with the content, right? You might not be a Susie Orman fan or whatever, but you could admire their commercial success. And then we start to look at those things and say, okay, don't just sort of go through the smorgasbord of best practices. I'll take 1 part Gary Vee and 2 parts Tony Robbins, and that must work, without putting it through a lens or a filter of what do your people want. So given that you are so tuned in, because your people are more sort of psychographic than demographic, and that you're very tuned into sort of how they operate and how they function and all that sort of stuff. I love that you're sort of observing what others are doing and then forcing yourself to put it through sort of the filter of, well, what would my peeps think? And
yes.
maybe some other things would work. Maybe they won't. Maybe they would work, but you got to do it a little bit differently, whatever. But just the fact that you're going through that process, everybody should do that, right? Just because it works for another thought leader doesn't mean it's going to work for you and most importantly for your people. So that's an awesome learning. Now let's flip to the positive side of that. What are the things that you've sort of rolled out there in an experimental way that have succeeded beyond what you may had anticipated?
Yeah, for sure. So first, let me just say, I so appreciate that you have that viewpoint and can really see the value of the process of adaptation, because I don't often, come across others who really get that. It always just seems that everyone is really looking for what is that, one sure fix formula. And I not only because of who I am and who I serve, but just in general, I don't believe that, any of it's meant to operate that way, because if it were, then there would just be one way and we would all be doing it.
Well, if it was that easy, everyone would be making a fortune just following the 5 steps to whatever. So.
Right. Exactly. And then from there, what I'll say, that, so one, with that idea of adaptation, I'm pretty much always taking a risk in terms of what I'm creating, what I'm putting out there. What has worked well along those lines is I got very clear very early on that I am meant to work in long-term relationships, and that the one and done model that is often found within the coaching industry, meaning, you join a program for 1 year and then you're done and you move on, is really not what is, one, best needed, or two, best served for highly sensitive entrepreneurs. And so I started just really basing, all of my work and teachings on the value of being in continuous community, and then therefore in the continuous process of learning. So along those lines, I have members who are in my mentoring programs who have already reserved their mentoring all the way through 2021.
That's awesome. So I want to add a comment to that, because oftentimes people don't realize that there is a natural tendency that is embedded in the business models that they're in. So for example, I work with a lot of folks that are speakers. Now, these people individually might be wonderful people and great relationship-based people, et cetera, but the speaking business is a highly transactional business. It's can you be in Scottsdale on, whatever, March the 7th? Yes, I can. What is your fee? Yes, great, you're booked. You come in, you do your thing, you leave. It's by almost the dictionary definition of a transaction. And when you move to getting into more relationship-based selling, and sometimes it's on the business model that drives it. Like if you want to embed your content into a large enterprise, whether you want to be relationship-based or not, it's sort of a requirement, because it's a sales cycle that might take 6 or 12 months. And then you have to do a pilot, and then you do a rollout, multi-year approach. And it's not that one's better than the other. We could debate that, and one might be better than the other. But making sure that you're aligned and understand, hey, if this is transactional, am I comfortable being transactional? If this is more relationship-based, do I have what it takes? Do I have the patience? Can I pass the marshmallow test kind of thing? So I love the way you sort of frame that.
Thank you. And I really agree with what you're saying. Absolutely. It just makes sense.
Cool. Okay. So you've now, who your people are. You know that one of the attributes or characteristics is they're more relationship-based. And your product offering is such, right? It's not a one-off webinar or I'm going to come in and do a half-day workshop and then we're done. So you sort of create the solutions to support that.
Yes.
As we're starting to wrap up here, what advice might you give sort of someone out there that is thinking of leaving their job as a drama teacher or something today, as you did 15, 18 years ago, to get into this space? What might you tell them to do or not do, or advise them to do?
So first of all, I would say know yourself. And what I mean by that is know what's driving you, what's motivating you. Why do you want this change? And if it's really just to flee and leave something else, I would highly recommend that you stop and pause and fully inquire in regards to what is it that you're trying to run away from, and how much of a part do you have to play in whatever it is that you're trying to run away from, because whatever that is, it will be waiting for you in the world of being self-employed.
I want to ask a question to understand that. So
Yes.
if the motivation is really, I have to leave X because I don't like it, whatever it is, that's different than I
Yes.
want to go and do Y, right? Which is more, something else is calling me versus I'm leaving something bad versus going to something that might be different or exciting. So it sounds like
That's right.
what you're saying is make sure you know why you're leaving, that not just the fact that
Yes.
you're leaving and anything must be better than this kind of thing, because the demons will follow you.
Yes. Yes,
Very cool.
exactly. That's the second part of it, is because if you think that you have nothing to do with why you're wanting to leave, if you're running away, like you have to stop and you have to really look at that. Because one of the things that I've said early on in my 15 years of being self-employed is that if you want to fast track to personal growth, start a business, because all of your, my language, all of your shit is going to come right up in your face.
Yeah.
Which is a great opportunity if you're willing to actually do the work around it.
Careful what you wish for if you're not, though.
Exactly. So know yourself, know your why, and double check yourself if it's only to get away from rather than to go towards.
Well, awesome. This has been fantastic, and I would highly recommend folks listening to it maybe a second time, because there's a lot of embedded wisdom in Heather's experience and the way that she shared it and the way that she's actually shaped and modeled her business around not just sort of some of her own personal awareness, but serving a community in a way that wasn't served and finding that opportunity and going for it. So thanks so much for sharing with us today.
I've loved talking. Thank you.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.